Today, we're going to look at a tier of quarterbacks in the QB2 area, and I think this will highlight why Superflex is the best way to play fantasy football. The first guy we're going to talk about is Jordan Love. So he's currently going as QB19 on Fantasy Pros, and he's going much higher on Sleeper, so I did want to include him in this group. But I do really think that Jordan Love has an opportunity here this year to improve quite a bit. He should be removed from that MCL sprain that really held back his rushing last year. He really didn't run that much at all last year. He didn't top 30 yards in any game. And I think that that's a part of his game that he really can lean into this year, that he can average around 30, 35 yards on the ground. And I think that can help elevate his floor. I know he lost Romeo Dobbs, but he still has Reed. He still has Golden, and obviously still has Christian Watson, who should be healthy to start the year. And having Watson as a downfield threat, as a touchdown scorer, I think is going to be huge for Love as long as he's on the field. Obviously, he comes with his own injury risks, but for the beginning of the year, at least, is to get you off the ground. Jordan Love, I think, is in an excellent position to play very well at the beginning of the year. Still only 27, can make all of the throws. That's another thing, too, is I feel like he's underrated as a passer. I feel like a lot of people maybe see the fantasy numbers or see that the Packers aren't necessarily doing as well as they should. The playoff success hasn't really been there. But I do think overall that Jordan Love is set up this year, going into the season healthy. His number one receivers going into the year healthy. We'll see what happens with Josh Jacobs, too. I mean, there might be some legal issues there, maybe a suspension during the year at some point. I do think that that could even help Jordan Love if Jacobs is out, that they have to lean on him more. They're going to have to throw it more. He might have a few more runs in there. And in those games, he could be set to go off. So I do think Jordan Love in a good situation this year. I really think that the Packers offense is going to take a step forward this year from what they did last year. And you can see here, right, he was quarterback 15 last year. It felt like a big disappointment, but he really was getting drafted pretty low last year as well, kind of in the back end of that QB1 area. So I understand the feeling of disappointment back-to-back years where it was 17 and 18. But in that first year as a full-time starter, he was QB5, and that obviously came with much more rushing production, right? He had the 4 touchdowns and the 250 yards, which is right in that area of being on the cusp of a top 10 quarterback. So if you're down in that area of the draft, you're looking for your second quarterback, and some of the guys in the mid-teens start to go, I think Jordan Love is a very good pick, and I definitely would be looking for him above his consensus rank. The next quarterback we're going to get into is Baker Mayfield. So he had an interesting season last year because he was coming off a massive 2024. He was getting drafted really highly. He was getting drafted well inside the top 10. It was kind of at that 7 or 8 point right behind Mahomes. He was kind of that swing quarterback to the next tier. And maybe that highlights why you don't pick at the top of a tier, right? That you kind of just tier your players and make sure that you get one before the end of the tier, because Baker was somebody that I was struggling to draft anywhere just because of where his ADP landed. But this year, he's going on Fantasy Pros as quarterback 18 currently, and I'm going to be all over that. I know Liam Cohen is gone, but he still finished as quarterback 12 last year. That was with his weapons coming on and off the field because of injuries. So Mike Evans missed time, Chris Godwin missed time, and Emeka Egbuka was there to kind of tide them over. So I think it was very fortunate for the offense overall to have him at the beginning of the year. And obviously he waned as the year went on as Godwin and Evans got healthy. But I think this year, Egbuka is going to be the number 1. Godwin's going to be healthy coming in, going to be the number 2. And I do think that they have a few other guys on the roster as well. Jalen McMillan, maybe Bucky is able to get involved in the passing game. And Kenneth Gainwell coming in and being a pass-catching running back, I think is really going to help Baker as well. So you see the rushing production. He's been well over 300 yards, over 350 yards the last 2 years. On the ground, very underrated part of his game. Really helps stabilize his floor, I think. And seeing him go as quarterback 18 after he's had 3 straight seasons of 10, 4, and 12, I think is just way overcorrecting on the market because of how much of a disappointment he was at ADP last year. But I can't highlight enough that I think he was just being overdrafted last year, and now it's swung completely the other way. You should definitely be looking for Baker around quarterback 15. And in your Superflex leagues, if you can figure out a way in your 10-team leagues to get him around, round 6 or 7, that's something that you got to be jumping all over, because I think that he has the potential to give you a big edge at your QB2 position. The last guy we're going to talk about is Jared Goff. So if you've been watching the channel, you know that we are all over Jared Goff. He is currently going as QB 16 in the consensus rankings on Fantasy Pros, and in Superflex leagues, I feel like that is just never the case. He is more boring than some of the other guys that maybe could have higher rushing upside or higher touchdown upside. Maybe not touchdown upside because he throws so many touchdowns, but you just see here, these last 4 years, it's been 10, 7, 6, and 9. He is as consistent of a back end QB1 as you could ask for. And going at quarterback 16 is just criminally undervalued for Superflex rankers, right? I feel like there should be a separate set of quarterback rankings for your Superflex leagues, because the way that he can stabilize your QB2 position and the way you can even build your roster around potentially getting him in round 6 this year is crazy, right? I mean, he's probably going to go more in round 5 of your 10-team leagues. I feel like if you play in Superflex, everybody is privy to Jared Goff. But if he does slip a round or two and you can possibly lock him in as your QB1 even, and you really load up your the rest of your roster early in your draft, I feel like that is an excellent way to try and build your team. Now, if you don't get him, then it kind of becomes questionable. Like, are you going to roll with Baker as your QB1 or, somebody else down in the rankings a little bit? Maybe that's a little bit risky during your draft because obviously you need the quarterbacks to be successful in Superflex. But building your draft strategy around possibly getting Jared Goff, if you get unbelievable values early, just reach around on Goff and you can really set up your team to be successful this year. I think that this is one of the best QB values that there is on the board currently. I do not understand why we continue to rank him collectively and in the back half of QB2 range, right? So at that 16 mark. So maybe mid QB2, because I really think overall that he just continues over and over to show that he is very consistent and that he's going to throw for a ton of yards and that there's going to be a ton of touchdowns in this offense. Obviously, going into this year, we're still expecting this offense to be one of the best in the league. They still have Amon-Ra St. Brown there. They still have Jameson Williams. Isaac Tesla was a touchdown scorer last year. We'll see if he can continue to fill that role as they get closer to the goal line. And then their weapons around them, around the wide receiver group in Sam Laporta and Jahmyr Gibbs, are just about as good as it gets. They're both young. They're both really dynamic in the passing game as well. Goff is just going to have so many opportunities here. You see, even in his year-over-year stats, you see the 539. So 1 year, he didn't have quite as many attempts, and that was his best year. He was so efficient. He threw for so many touchdowns. And I know that year specifically, they played in a dome so many years. So that was something we talked about in the preseason, right? That their first 15 games or something like that were in a dome. So, that fed into it a little bit, and they were winning games by so much that year. But again, Jared Goff, somebody that you should definitely be looking to build your draft strategy around if he is going to continue to stay at QB 16. So overall for this group, I have it ranked Jared Goff, then Baker, then Jordan Love. And, as much as I love Jordan Love and I am a Packer fan, I just think that these other two have an opportunity for more upside, even though I do think Love has quite a solid floor and could be a back-end QB1 himself. So I just love the position here. I think these three guys in particular are where, leagues are going to potentially be won because there's going to be so much value down in this range. And whoever gets one of these guys at the best value could have one of the better teams coming out of your draft. So again, it's Goff, then Baker, then Love, but I do love all of them in that 5th, 6th, 7th round range, depending on how those quarterbacks all around them start to fall. And if you can get, say, Love in round 7, Goff in round 5, Love in round 7, something like that, I think your quarterbacks are going to be set up super, super strong for the season. And what you can do in the first 4 rounds doing that with your quarterbacks can really set your team up to explode this year.